In the beginning. Three words. Three words that shaped civilizations, crowned kings, built doctrines, judged sinners, comforted the dying, and terrified children. But what if those three words were never meant to answer the questions we forced onto them? Because the moment science walked into the room, carrying stone, bone, dust, and time, the story got complicated. Earth is about 4.54 billion years old. Non-bird dinosaurs lived roughly 245 to 66 million years ago. And our own species, Homo sapiens, appears only around 300,000 years ago, after a much older hominin story stretching back more than 6 million years. That is not a wrinkle in the fabric, that is the whole fabric catching fire. So if Genesis is read as a simple, literal sequence of material events, then the courtroom gets awkward fast. Because where exactly do the dinosaurs go? Where do the vanished worlds go? Where do the creatures that ruled this planet for millions of years fit into a reading that many people were taught to picture as clean, recent, and complete? They don't vanish because a preacher ignores them. They stay buried in the rock like evidence that refuses to leave the witness stand. And it gets worse. Before modern humans, there were other hominins, not imaginary ones, not symbolic ones. Real beings with bones, tools, migrations, and histories. The human line is not a neat staircase rising toward us like destiny. It is a branching, broken, ancient thicket, which means the old picture many people inherited, one man, one woman, one clean beginning, starts to look less like history and more like a painted icon laid over a much older wall. And then there is the text itself. Genesis does not even present one perfectly seamless creation account. It presents two. In Genesis 1, plants come, then animals, then man and woman together. In Genesis 2, the order shifts. A human is formed, a garden is planted, animals appear, and then a woman is built from the man. Many scholars point to that difference not as a flaw to hide, but as a clue that the text is doing theology and literary shaping, not handing you a lab notebook. That is where the real trial begins. Because maybe the crisis is not that science discovered too much. Maybe the crisis is that many people were taught to read an ancient sacred text as if it were a modern forensic report. That is a cruel setup. For the believer and the skeptic, it turns fossils into enemies. It turns telescopes into insults. It turns every dinosaur bone into a threat to faith, every hominin skull into a weapon, every geological layer into a courtroom exhibit against God. But the text itself may never have applied for that job. Maybe Genesis was never trying to tell you the age of the planet or the chronology of hominin evolution. Maybe it was trying to answer older, stranger questions. Who are we? Why do we know shame? Why does consciousness feel like both a gift and a wound? Why does the world feel ordered enough to trust, yet broken enough to fear? That does not make Genesis fake. It makes it dangerous in a different way. Because if Genesis is not a science manual, then it stops being easy to dismiss and starts becoming harder to read. Now it becomes a mirror instead of a map, a theological drama instead of a timeline, a story about meaning, rebellion, mortality, and rupture, not a blow-by-blow documentary of paleontology. The Bible Odyssey discussion of the two creation narratives points in exactly that direction. These are shaped accounts with different emphases, not a single flat technical description. And that possibility unsettles both camps. It unsettles the literalist because the ground stops being simple. It unsettles the atheist because the text may still hold psychological and symbolic power even after it loses a fight with geology. And it unsettles everyone in between because now the real question is no longer, did Genesis get the sequence right? The real question becomes, why were so many people taught that their faith depended on it? Why were they taught that reverence must stand or fall on a timeline the rocks do not support? Why was sacred literature forced into a cage built by modern expectations, then mocked for failing to behave like a physics textbook? Why were children taught to choose between wonder and evidence, as if truth were so fragile it could not survive a fossil? And this is where the narration turns. Because the shocking possibility is not merely that Genesis is inaccurate as science, the shocking possibility is that many of us inherited the wrong argument. Maybe the first pages of the Bible were never meant to compete with radiometric dating, evolutionary history, or the fossil record. Maybe the real distortion happened later, when institutions, teachers, and cultures demanded that poetry answer questions it was never written to answer. USGS summarizes Earth's age in billions of years, the Natural History Museum places dinosaurs millions of years before modern humans, and the Smithsonian places our species deep inside a long hominin history. Those facts are not small corrections. They are the end of a simplistic reading, but they are not necessarily the end of meaning. So maybe the final scandal is this: not that science killed Genesis, not that fossils buried faith, not that dinosaurs embarrassed the Bible, but that we were told we had to choose between reality and reverence in the first place. Maybe the real betrayal was never in the bones, maybe it was in the teaching. Maybe the serpent was not knowledge, maybe the serpent was the voice that whispered, "If the story is not literal in every detail, it is worthless." And maybe that was the oldest trick of all.